All right, we are live tonight. Thursday evening, February 12th, about 7 o'clock. And tonight we're going to talk about long term care insurance. We're going to just go over the basics, why it's important, how people plan for it, and different types of it. Not really going to get into costs or too many deep details. Just give you an idea of kind of how it works and why we think it's very important here at Bill Gear Insurance. My name is Mark Bill Gear with Bill Gear Insurance, and we help people with their Medicare, their long-term care, their life insurance, and making sure their retirement is pretty stable, because healthcare is the number one thing that can wipe out even a well-prepared for retirement and can erode a portfolio faster than just about anything else. So let's jump in, just do a little bit of long-term care insurance discussion, and then if you have any questions, please just let me know, and we will check that, and we will do our best to answer questions for you. Or if you want to contact us later, absolutely, please do that. So let's get into protecting your most important asset, your family. They are your most important asset. All right, so why does this matter? Well, because people live longer. People are just living longer thanks to medical technology, pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of education about how we can take care of ourselves. Whether we take that advice or not is a different matter, but modern medicine can do great things. There's a lot of chronic illnesses. So chronic illness is what's going to stick with us longer. Those are the things that don't go away versus acute illness. That's like having an accident and something heals and gets better. Cost of care for these chronic illnesses can derail the best laid retirement plans. So we want to make sure we have protection against that. And that doesn't mean you have to have a huge portfolio to protect or a huge estate. It means you don't want to run out of money, because you planned on a certain amount of money you should be able to live on. And if something comes up and has to take most of that away, then what are you going to do? And also, I want to stress, this is not just about nursing homes. So many times when people talk about long-term care, they just assume that we're talking about a nursing home, and they have this terrible image of a little old lady sitting in a wheelchair, pushed face forward into a corner and forgotten about. That's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about care, people being taken care of and getting to live, hopefully, in their community and with loved ones around them. And if not, then at least in the best situation that they can provide for themselves, or someone else can provide for them too. So again, it's not about dying. It's about living longer than expected, which is happening to a lot of people. There's also, I'm going to touch on it a little bit more. You're going to find there's going to be a shortage pretty soon of long-term care resources, people, places, things like that, because the baby boomers are all hitting that age, right? The first baby boomers just hit 80 years old. That's when it really kicks in, long-term care. And there's so many of them that it's going to be one of the fastest growing job markets, that's for sure, long-term caregivers. So when is it needed? Well, it's needed if you have a physical impairment, some sort of chronic medical condition that can be managed by medication or therapy, but it can't be cured by either one. So what does that mean? That means you're going to live with it for a long time, right? Things that people maybe used to die of pretty fast, people just don't die of anymore. Now we live with them, they can treat them, we can go about our daily business, but then it gets to a point where we're not fully functioning anymore and we might need some help. So these will compromise our ability to get through our daily routines, some of the most basic activities. Or as opposed to physical impairment, it becomes a cognitive impairment, and that's a major decline in your intellect, making it difficult for you to safely interact with your environment. So a lot of the people talk about cognitive impairment, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, things like that. Really what that becomes is a safety issue, because once people are having memory issues or cognition problems, then they forget that the oven is hot, or they forget where they are, or they forget where they're going and things like that. So they may physically be okay. They don't have a physical impairment, but because of that cognitive impairment, it becomes quite necessary to provide them 24-hour care just as a safety precaution. However, both of these conditions require what we call custodial care. They're not medical care. The medical care, that's going to be handled by medical insurance, most likely. Custodial care, however, is not covered by Medicare. It's not covered by Medicare supplements, and it's not covered by Medicare Advantage plans. So I do a lot of Medicare. I help a lot of clients with their Medicare needs, and they always ask about long-term care, and I have to tell them, this type of care is not covered. If you need to go into a nursing home, it's not going to be paid for by Medicare. It's only your health care. So what exactly is custodial care? Well, custodial care helps with what we call the activities of daily living. Well, what are the activities of daily living? Whoops. They are bathing, dressing, eating, transferring, toileting, and continence. So if you ever have trouble with two of those, doesn't have to be all of them, but it can't just be one of them. It's got to be at least two of them. Then you're probably going to qualify, if you have some type of insurance, to go on claim or turn that insurance on. Usually they're based around your activities of daily living. And those are the most common ones: bathing yourself, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, transferring. That's kind of a picture of transferring right there. It's getting from a chair to a wheelchair, or from a bed to a chair, bed to a wheelchair, things like that. Toileting, getting in and out of the bathroom on your own. Cleaning yourself, if you're having trouble with that, that's one of them, or just plain old continence issues. So those are the activities of daily living. That's what long-term care is usually based around. So where do people get help if they need help like that? Well, there's a couple of regular care settings. One is home care. So you want to stay at home. And honestly, that's what most people choose to do nowadays. If possible, they'd rather live at home, whether that means professional people come in and help them. They hire people, they pay people, or if they have someone in their family or a neighbor or someone who they go to church with. Something like that. Quite often it ends up being a child, ends up being one of the children in the home. It often starts with the spouse, but if two spouses are both elderly, quite honestly, one spouse can't take care of the other. So I might touch on a few personal experiences here in just a second. Assisted living home. If you just can't live on your own anymore and there's nobody there that's going to be able to help you or spend that amount of time with you, helping you, you could go to assisted living where you live primarily on your own, but there are people there to help. A skilled nursing facility, if you need a little bit more help, an actual nursing home where they basically take care of you, make your meals, do everything for you. And then, of course, memory care, which is just another version, but it's geared towards people that have some of those cognitive issues that may or may not have physical issues, but cognitive for sure. So what's the probability? I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. I don't have a lot of slides on it because you can find any statistic you want, quite honestly. So the probability that you'll find most often in any sort of search is that roughly 70% of people 65 and over will need some type of long-term care. And so I repeated some type of care. That doesn't mean they're going to live in a nursing home, doesn't even mean they're going to live in an assisted living facility. It means at some point in their life, they may need help with two of their ADLs. It could be recovery after some sort of major surgery or major accident, if it's going to last for more than 90 days or to a year or something like that. They may be using some of their long-term care benefits for something like that. So one of the other things is when you ask long-term care companies, people who purchase long-term care, honestly, about 50% of the people who purchase it. Now, that's 50% of the people who purchase it. Remember, a lot of people don't purchase it. In fact, most people don't purchase long-term care insurance. But about 50% of them end up having to turn it on. So what's your chance? Well, your chance is either 0 or 100% or somewhere in the middle. If anybody really knew for sure, this would be a super easy process to go through and make a decision. Generally, women will need care longer than men. If they need it, Men are a little less than 2 years. Women are a little closer to 3 years. Again, averages are, averages. Everybody's going to be different. Some of the longest ones have been going for 12, 13, 14, 15 years. The insurance companies have paid well over $2 million for these people. There's just no way of knowing. If we could know it, the whole question would be moot. And the dementia care, like I said, a lot of times if it's just cognitive and you're not having a lot of physical problems, then that can last multiple years, and that can become very expensive and very troubling for the family and all the people around who are trying to provide that care. Most long-term care actually begins at home. That's why I said we don't want to focus on a nursing home. We want to focus on care, because care usually begins pretty slow, and it usually begins at home. And I'll give you a simple example. Somebody is getting older and, they're still getting around. They're on their own. Maybe they're widowed, right? So it's somebody living by themselves. But now they feel like it's unsafe to drive after dark. That's all right. There's tons of older people who don't want to drive after dark. I don't like to drive after dark too much either. But, that's no big deal. We see that all the time. Well, then they don't want to go on highways even during the day. And then they don't want to go more than 2 miles. And then they get in an accident one day close to home. And pretty soon, they're not driving. Well, that's not one of their ADLs, but you can see the progression of that person losing the ability to start doing things. Because then what's going to happen is things at home are going to start dropping off. Right now, they're forgetting things. They're forgetting to take medicine. They're forgetting what they need from the store. They're forgetting to ask someone to go to the store for them, or they're too embarrassed. They don't want to ask. So they go without food. And when somebody goes without food, they become weaker. So if they're already fighting a chronic condition, it's going to get worse, right? Or they just eat improper foods or too much junk food, things like that. So it really starts slow, and then all of a sudden you're in it. And if you're not prepared for it, or you don't have a plan for it, once you need it, you can't have it. That's one thing about almost every type of insurance. Once you need it, you can't get it. So what does care cost now? This is just a screenshot, so I can't go in and make changes to it. But you can see I picked Fort Worth, Texas. We are based in Dallas, Fort Worth. I picked the year 2025. And then just what the monthly cost would be. So just to have a home health aide come would cost on average about $6,200 a month in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If I wanted to go into assisted living, it would cost me about $5,300, $5,400 a month. That would be for the rent, right, in an assisted living community. And if I wanted a private room in a nursing home, be about $7,800 a month. That's this year, 2025 or 2026 is what I bumped it up to, or 2025, I guess it's from December 2025. But what's it going to cost in 10 years? Well, now that same home health aide is going to cost almost $8,500 a month. Assisted living is going to be $7,200 a month. And a private room in a nursing home is going to be $10,500. So $125,000 a year. And, that doesn't include my medical care. That doesn't include if someone is going to travel to live by me or to be near me or all the other things that go in. That's just to have the place to live and get along every day. That's pretty expensive. If you have $500,000 saved, that's awesome. If you have to put $125,000 out of pocket, you're going to run out of money real fast. So that's what we're trying to do, is keep that from getting chipped away at. But maybe more importantly, not more importantly, but just as important, is what's the impact on your family? So what would the consequences be to your loved ones if you ever needed care? Well, there's going to be two sets of consequences. The first one is the emotional consequences. And I can tell you that I've had 3 experiences with long-term care very close to me. and the emotional and physical well-being of those who become caregivers and those around the caregivers is the first thing you usually notice, because it's very, very hard on the caregiver. So what happens when a child becomes a caregiver? Because remember, it's almost always a child that becomes a caregiver once the other spouse, if there is another spouse, is unable to help. Well, providing care to chronically ill people makes healthcare givers chronically ill. We had the experience of my father-in-law, after his wife passed away, he had to come live with us in our house. And my wife, his daughter, who was an only child, so there were no other options, she became his caregiver. In addition to, we had 2 teenage boys at the time, and myself, and her full-time job. And in addition to that, now she had to take care of her dad, who was a kidney patient on dialysis with home dialysis, which required her to be home every night to hook him up at 9 in the morning and up every morning to take him off the machine. And we could see it. It changed her. She was becoming very stressed, very worn out. It was just hard to watch, but at the same time, she wouldn't have done anything different because she's going to take care of her dad. And that's what most people do. So it usually forces that child to put aside her or his own life because they don't have any other choice. And we went through the motions of trying to have a regular life, but it wasn't normal. You have a grandparent living in your house all of a sudden and hasn't lived there before, and they're sick all the time. Even my teenage boys, they both came home and found granddaddy on the floor a couple of times in the bathroom. He had forgotten that he couldn't walk, and he had tried and he fell, and they'd hear it and they'd rush into the room and they had to pick him up. So that was pretty traumatic for everybody. And sometimes providing care doesn't really bring the children together. Maybe one lives closer and feels like they're doing everything, or some chip in more money and the others don't have any money, or just don't feel the need or the urge because they're not that close. Sometimes it tears them apart. So what we share with people is how it works. If somebody needs long-term care, quite simply, if you need care over a period of years, your life is not going to end, but somebody else's is. These families, they struggle a lot, and they struggle against the odds to keep people at home. And sometimes you look, and we've actually had people ask us, why are you guys doing that? Well, because if you have to make a place